Today I have a Miss Gendron from Los Angeles. She's a comedian and she is a story that I've been highly fascinated by. Hello, Miss Gendron.
Hi there.
Hi. So I wanted to dive really quick into where your story began, if you don't mind sharing those details.
No problem. I was born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana in 1970. And in 1975, I was court ordered to a psychiatrist. He diagnosed me as having chronic sexual identity crisis. And that kept me going to psychiatrists until I was 13, at which time my parents put me in a mental institution to try to get me to act like a normal boy. Obviously, that did not work. And it got to the point where the psychiatrist was suggesting ECT, electroshock therapy, to my parents to get me to act normal. My mother thankfully put her foot down and said, absolutely not. And she took me out of the facility that same day. In less than a year, she found out I was at the mall after school with full makeup on, dressed as a girl, and I was with a boy from class, and we were by the fountains at the mall, and I was kissing him. And my mother's boyfriend happened to be at the mall, and he saw me. So when I got home, my mom confronted me. She wanted to know what I thought I was doing. I told her that it had been going on for a while and that I needed to be a girl. And she absolutely flipped, lost her mind, told me, if you think you're grown, you think you know best, there's the door, walk out of it. Don't ever think you're coming back through it again. Basically just get out. So I left, and then I was out with friends within a week or two, and we went to a club one night that happened to be called the Booby Rock. And out front it said Triple X Live Transsexual Strippers. So my friends and I went in there, and it was after 2 a.m., so it was after hours. I met another trans girl in the bathroom. She introduced herself as Angel. She asked me what my name was, and I told her my dead name because I didn't know any better at the time. She said, no, Mama, I mean, what's your girl name? I said, I don't have one. I'm not a girl. She said, no, trust me, you are. She said, look, just keep it simple. Stick to as close to your real name as possible. So I did. So she gave me my name that night. Within 2 weeks of there, I was introduced to an older woman named Chinga who used to go to Mexico. She would buy hormones in bulk and then bring them back to Houston to sell girls in the clubs. So that was how I started taking hormones when I was 14. For the first 4 years I was on HRT. It was from buying them from Mexico.
In 1975, awareness was at an all-time low. I'm pretty sure not even like mainstream media had picked up anything about transgender equality or anything at that point. Is that correct?
I had heard nothing of other people like myself at that time.
Yeah, it was so obscure. So then you mentioned that you were homeless for a bit, obviously, because your mother had kicked you out. How did you manage to weave through that?
I couch surfed for about 6 weeks. And then one evening, I was strolling up the street in an area that I knew was known for prostitution. A man pulled over and he offered me a ride. I got in and we started talking. Come to find out, he was a Protestant missionary. He ended up paying me to have sex with him that night. And that was how I got my first hotel room. And that got me off the streets. And once I knew how to make money and once I knew I could, I became pretty self sufficient pretty quickly.
Okay, so you did that for a number of years. Let's look at how did you find
I'll
yourself as a comedian?
That wasn't until much later. I started stripping when I was 15. I did that and hustled the streets both throughout my teens. And then when I hit early to mid 30s, I moved to California. And when I moved here, I started making friends with a few people in the entertainment industry. One of them took me to a comedy club and introduced me to a couple of other comedians. I got bitten by the bug. After that, I just started hanging around the clubs until somebody gave me a break.
Okay. Back to the point before, the reality is you had to do what you had to do. And ultimately, stigmas aside, money is money,
Mhm.
and there is respect in that working fields. Let's talk a bit
Yeah.
about your experience with having to do what you had to do to make money. If you have anything there you wanted to share.
The thing about having to turn tricks to make money is it's a trap, and a lot of these young girls find themselves in those situations. They think, oh, this is a fast way for me to make the money to get my surgeries. This is going to get me started in life with a foot up, and the thing is it really doesn't. You think you're the one in control and that you have all the power, but you really have none, and it's the person with the money that holds the power. By the time you realize it's a trap, you're already trapped. So few make it back out of that. It's just not worth it to go there in the first place if you can avoid it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I wasn't able to avoid it.
But you got out of it, which is absolutely massive. Was it comedy that was your ladder out?
No, I got to a point where I was so depressed and I hated it so much. By the end years that I was doing it, every single client, I would tell them, you have to give me 2 or 3 days heads up. You have to recall and check in with me like 2 or 3 times leading up to it, just hoping that they would flake on me, honestly. And then when they would come over, I would go into a depression for a good day or two. So I would charge through the nose just so that I wouldn't have to work as much. You know, I wasn't even doing it to be greedy. I was doing it so that I just didn't have to see that many people. When I turned 33, I had made a promise to myself that I would not become a 40-year-old hooker sitting on a bar stool trying to pay my rent. And at 33, I thought it's scarily close. I'm not there yet, but if I don't walk away from this, I'm going to be there. And so I walked away. I totally left the state of Louisiana. I came to California, turned my back on everything I knew and started over.
And how did you start over? So what was your foundation?
My foundation, I met a man. He's the reason I picked California because this is where he was. He helped me walk away from it in the beginning. He was my support system until I got my feet grounded and figured out what it was I wanted to do. So that really enabled me to be able to take my time and do what I wanted to do instead of having to struggle. I think if I would have had to struggle, I might have fallen back into old habits. It's hard to say.
Understandable, yeah.
Yeah.
So when you look at your younger years, obviously things would have been much different if your mother had just supported you. It's a bit of a loaded question, but do you look at those years fondly?
The early years of transition, I look at them through a double-edged blade of a viewpoint because I had a lot of fond memories and I had a lot of close friends that unfortunately most of them did not survive the 80s. But I had a wonderful group of friends as a teenager. And I mean, I had a lot of fun when I wasn't having to turn tricks. I had a lot of fun in the 80s. Can't say that I look at it with a really negative viewpoint. I feel like everything that I went through at that time shaped me to be who I was supposed to be in the first place. I cannot, in good conscience, hold on to a bunch of animosity about things that happened decades ago.
Yeah, because I look at it and I feel like I'm coming from a point where I've never lived that life, but it sounds
Mhm.
genuinely just sincerely exciting, if anything.
It had its moments, you know. I mean, there's encounters with celebrities and got to party with Boy George one time in Hollywood. It had its fun times. It really did. I dated a particular celebrity that I've talked about on the internet before, but I don't know if you want me saying his name on here.
Sure.
And when I was 19, I dated Eddie Murphy for about 9 months.
Damn, okay. I love Eddie Murphy. Holy
Yeah.
shit. That's
Yeah,
hype.
he
Okay.
actually paid to move me. Eddie met my best friend first, and then
Mm.
he paid her to move me from Louisiana to Hollywood in 89. So I was
Oh.
out here in 89 for about a year that time.
That is so cool.
Mhm.
Jeez Louise. Okay, so then talking about your family, are you still in contact at all with your mother or father, or were you when you were still able to be?
My mother and I made up after that eventually, probably a decade later, by the time she got past the trans part. The part that we never got past was the child abuse and the things that I went through as a young child with her.
Yeah.
Those are the things that we never got past. And she passed away when I was 28. Those are things that I'll never get to work out with her. Now, my father and I eventually we made up. He apologized profusely for his part in my childhood, you
Mhm.
know, and said that he realized how many things he got wrong, told me that he realized looking back that I had never behaved like a boy child. Like for him to try to put that on me was never right because it never fit me. And he realizes that now. And he's very proud of me now. It's silly, but when I had bottom surgery, he was thrilled. I mean,
Yeah.
thrilled that I had that done because in his mind, it was like, okay, whew, now she's daughter. Whatever it takes for him, I guess. I didn't feel that way, but whatever it takes for him.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he has a lot of reasons to be proud of you. You've been there and back again, essentially.
He does say that he's proud of me for being really strong, too, and for being a survivor.
So, is there anything else about your story that you'd like to share?
I was thinking about this because I heard you ask another girl what advice would she give out there to people. And honestly, if I were going to try to talk to anyone, I would probably want to talk to parents of trans kids more so than the trans kids themselves, because I've known a lot of trans kids and we tend to know who we are much more than people give us credit for. But our parents, they have such a hard time with it. And if that love and support is there, there's no telling how far a trans child can go in this world. If it's not there, there's no telling how far down they can sink. You might end up with a dead child not supporting them. I'm not even talking about the suicide rates. I'm talking about the sick twist that could pick your child up in a street somewhere and leave them dead in an alley. It's very unfortunate unfortunate that so many parents don't see what they're doing by not being supportive. When they think they're doing the right thing, they're so often doing the very, very wrong thing.
Yeah, 100% I agree with that for sure. Usually I end the interviews off with a little bit of advice. I want to see just a bit more about your story, however. To this date, you're in California, you said, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And you're working as a comedian. How is it being
Mhm.
a comedian that is trans in the industry?
It's different. It's interesting because the comedian world it's still an old boys club kind of situation. So in a lot of environments, just being a woman walking through the door, you already have a strike against you. And then you add trans in front of that woman. And it's like, wow. Even in LA, it kind of takes people back. And I've grown quite used to being, for lack of a better phrase, the token in shows. And I know that they use me for that factor, for that diversity. They want that diversity in their lineup, which is good for them. It works for me. So I guess everybody wins. I
Hmm.
just don't always know how genuine that is.
Understandable. Okay.
I mean, I absolutely love it.
I don't doubt it. Being a comedian seems quite exciting.
I always start off with a joke. I always tell people, okay, I'm sure that some of you are looking at me and you are thinking, there's something about that girl, something I just can't quite put my finger on. And then I'll tell them, you got me. I'm Stifler's mom. But that's because I have the blonde hair, the big boobs. Now, that joke kind of works with crowds for me. So,
I'm not gonna lie. Look, I saw your profile picture and I was like, kind of looks like Stifler's mom. In the best
yeah,
way possible. That's a compliment, I think, in my eyes.
thank you.
Of course. But you weren't Stifler's mom in as far as acting goes, I don't think.
No, no, never
'Cause
got
if
to
you
do
were,
that.
that
The
would have been
last
fucking
acting
amazing.
job I was offered, I was supposed to be a bikini model in a sitcom, and then the pandemic happened and it got canceled. They never ended
Hmm.
up shooting the show.
That's a shame.
Yeah, especially since now I feel like the years are starting to tick by. I don't really think I'm going to do bikini body type things anymore.
It's understandable. Well, what are some struggles that you face to date?
Getting old. That's the big one. I mean, being trans from the generation that I came from, most of us did not survive. I started out with a group, there were 6 of us. All 6 of us were about the same age. We had all left home about the same age, and we stuck together like a family unit. And out of that 6, I'm the sole survivor.
Damn.
The other 5 are all dead. And the oldest one out of them lived to be like 32. So the life expectancy for a trans woman from my generation was never very long. And the fact that I'm still here is kind of astonishing to me sometimes. Honestly, I deal with survivor's guilt from the 80s. The AIDS epidemic was huge and it took so many people I knew
Yeah.
that, yeah, I deal with survivor's guilt. I don't regret that I went for what I went for in my life. I don't regret that I made the choice to own who I was. I've
You made
never
the right
regretted
choice.
that, not for a single minute. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I 100% see that. In that note, what are some golden takeaways from the decisions that you made?
Probably one of the biggest ones was when I did achieve bottom surgery. That's a big ticket one for us. Getting to that point for me, because so much of my life was spent selling the image of that trans fantasy of breast and penis. And there's that fantasy that men have of the pornography side of things that I was very, very grateful to finally know that they could not treat me that way any longer. For me, that was a very big deal. Walking away from the sex industry was huge. I mean, for
Yeah.
a decade, I still had nightmares that I would wake up and I would be stuck back on those streets having to do what I had to do before. So the fact that I actually broke away from it and stuck to it, that was definitely a golden moment. Other than that, I would say my golden moments have been the friends that I've met along the way that are still with me. Got my best friend sitting right here in the room with me that we've known each other for 33 years now. That's wonderful. And I'm very
No,
lucky to have the people I have in my life and to have had the life I've had.
I think so too. I'm happy that you made it, and you're definitely a fighter and a survivor. So
Thank
genuinely
you.
inspiring for sure. Especially, we live
Thank
in a
you.
time where we're fortunate to have the rights that we do, but you were essentially one of the ones that paved the path, one of the original, the OGs, if you will.
Yeah, it
So
was still illegal to even be dressed as a female fully when I started. You had to have on one article of male clothing or they could arrest you for cross dressing.
really,
Yes, that was a real thing. And I
wow.
used to make cops so mad because I would wear a Mickey Mouse man's watch. And that was my one article of male items,
There you
that I would
go.
claim.
So
Yeah.
did you get by with that?
It worked most of the time, unless they were in a really pissy mood. I mean, they did get a hold of me one time and shave my head because that's what they like to do to the trans girls in New Orleans. if they arrest you, 9 times out of 10, they're going to shave your head.
That's fucked.
They use the excuse of it's so that you don't spread lice.
My
Okay,
God.
but they don't do it to anyone else.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Well, I want to ask now that we've had some
Mhm,
more time to settle in, what is
mhm.
one piece of advice you would give the trans community?
Know that there is never, ever, ever a perfect time to start. It doesn't exist. So often, so many girls talk about the years and the time that was wasted because they were scared. And it's such a wasted emotion. There's never going to be a perfect time. If you know it's who you are, my mother used to tell me, if you know that you are right about something with every fiber of your being, then you fight for that thing to your last drop of blood. You give it everything you've got. That would be my advice. If you know this is who you are, don't let anyone on this planet stop you from it. No one.
Well said. Well, if there's anything else you'd like to include, now's the time.
Not that I can think of. I think that kind of covers it.
What was the YouTube channel that you have for comedies?
It's my regular, the one that you see me comment under. I've got a couple of videos up on there, but I don't put a lot up there. I need to. I really need to. I'm not very tech savvy. I'm really not.
Fair. Well, it was a honest pleasure. This was great.
No, it was for me too. It really was.
I'll catch you later.
All right. Bye bye.